My job as a writer, and especially as a fiction writer, is to complicate things. It's to make what seems maybe to be a simple story or something that seems super obvious, to make it more nuanced and to sort of hold open a space for readers to have to hold two contradictory things in mind at the same time. I think fiction is a really great place for us to practice living with ideas that contradict each other and yet both exist. In the 90s, when I think we wanted to show our racial awareness, we would say things like, "I don't see race." And it was meant in this positive way, meaning what your race is doesn't matter to me. And I remember that being sort of the way to express sort of like racial solidarity or your awareness of these social issues. And I think there's been a shift since then, and we start to realize that if you say, "I don't see race," I don't see you as an Asian woman, or I don't see you as a black man, you're actually ignoring a huge part of who that person is, how the world has treated them, because the rest of the world definitely sees them as an Asian woman, a black man, a black woman, a Latina woman, whatever it is. It's nodding to the question that this is actually a larger issue of power and privilege that we're looking at, not just questions of race and not just questions of gender, but that whole question of who is allowed to laugh at who's allowed to think that they have the upper hand, who is always being put forward as the butt of the joke. Part of what leads us to read is a curiosity about other people. That's part of what leads me to write, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Reading can often be a safe space to explore feelings that we're not sure how to deal with in our lives. It can be a way to get a window into another culture, another time, someone who's just living in very different circumstances than you are, experiences that you haven't had. These are good things. I think these are really positive reasons for fiction to show you something that's different from your own life. I think in the end, however, you have to have a sense of connection and empathy with those people that you're reading about, because otherwise it does end up sort of being like this voyeuristic tourism. If a piece of fiction is working well for me, I end up finding a moment of kinship with the person or the time period or the experience that I didn't realize I was going to have and that I didn't realize I would have. And I think if you don't have that, that's when it starts to feel a little bit exploitative. Similarly, I think that if you go into a book, at the end, hopefully you have some empathy for the characters. A lot of readers don't like Elena Richardson in the book, and that's okay. They don't have to. But I hope that they see why she did some of the things that she did, even if they believe I would never do that. I think that ultimately is sort of the most important thing that fiction can do, is ask us to come out with some kind of empathy. And for me, that's sort of the line. Are you on the side that still has empathy?
I totally agree. I think for me, I often think about something I heard when I was working in social work, which is that instead of saying to somebody, even if only in your own mind, what's wrong with you, instead to think, what happened to you? What have you been through? Sometimes when people ask me, why I was so frustrated with this character, why did they do that? I always say, I don't feel it's my job to judge my characters. It's my job to try to understand why they do what they do.
I love that, and I think I hadn't thought about the connection to social work, but I think about that a lot in terms of I also try not to judge my characters, but what I want is for my characters to be seen clearly, in both their good moments and their less good moments. I think a lot about this sort of saying in fiction that we hear a lot in MFA programs, that the purpose of writing is to make the familiar feel unfamiliar and to make the unfamiliar feel familiar. So in other words, to take something that you think you know and show you the sides of it that you didn't know. You think you know this person's story, right? And then you find out actually the specifics of it that make them individual. Likewise, you see someone that you think you have nothing in common with, you will never understand them. And then you start to understand something of their story. You understand what their background was or why they did what they did, even if you don't condone it. That is the sort of work that we need to do as fiction writers, but I think it's essentially the work of being human and living in a society, is just trying to understand people and see them for who they are.